We should be ready. So, I know I'm doing this in the middle of the night. Sorry for that, guys. But I had to watch my little brother, so it's just gonna be a late night stream. Let me do some stuff, make sure I'm ready. And for the first video, we are doing No, Europe Isn't Falling Behind by TDLR News. Let's get into it.
Past month or so, Econ Twitter has been dominated by a debate over whether or not Europe is actually falling behind the US economically, with a contingent of mostly American economists arguing that Europe's decline is overstated, and another contingent of self-flagellating Europeans arguing that Europe's stagnation is in fact real. And well, after a fair bit of back and forth, and since we did our last video on the topic, it looks like the Americans have essentially won the argument. So in this video, we're going to explain why, according to the best data available, Europe is actually keeping pace with the US, and why it matters. Despite its overwhelming presence, there are still a handful of EU countries not using the euro. Why is this, and what's going on with the euro's missing members? That's just one of the of how to best compare European and American GDP. You can't really use a euro-dollar exchange rate, because this is affected by all sorts of funky stuff. Most obviously, the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, which means the demand for the dollar spikes during times of turmoil. This is why economists generally prefer purchasing power parity, or PPP, which basically tries to figure out how much people can actually buy in a given country. The way this works is you create a basket of goods that an average household might buy: food, housing, clothing, etc. You then find out how much this basket would cost in each country and use that to create a new exchange rate. If the basket costs $100 in the US, for instance, and 50 euros in the EU, this will give you an exchange rate of 2 to 1, because a euro goes twice as far in the EU as a dollar does in the US. You would then take the EU's GDP in euros, multiply it by 2, and compare it to America's dollar-denominated GDP. However, while this works well for comparisons in a single year, it becomes more complicated if you want to make comparisons over a longer time period. For this, you have two options. You can either repeat the basket exercise each year and create what's known as a current price series, or you can do the basket exercise in one specific year and then extrapolate into the future or past by using each country's GDP data to create what's known as a constant price series. Broadly speaking, our self-flagellating European economists were arguing that we shouldn't use the current price series because it minimizes productivity growth. This argument is easier to understand with an example. So let's imagine, for instance, that America's iPhone industry produces 1,000 iPhones in 2026, each valued at $1,000. Let's then imagine that America's iPhone industry doubles in productivity, and America produces twice as many iPhones in 2027 as it did in 2026. America's economy has clearly grown. However, if this doubling of production leads to a halving of prices, then it won't show up in current price sales. After all, according to current price sale data, in 2026, the US produced $1 million worth of iPhones, and in 2027, it again produced $1 million worth of iPhones. This clearly overlooks some real productivity gains, and is the main reason to use the constant price series. In response, our American economists made two counter-arguments. The first is that extrapolating out a basket of goods from one specific year forces you to rely on real GDP estimates from national statistics agencies, which are calculated taking their country's nominal GDP and accounting for inflation. The problem here is that different agencies use wildly different methodologies. To illustrate this, let's go back to our iPhone example. Some statistical agencies might look at the price. The iPhone got 50% cheaper between 2020.
I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I thought this was standardized. Like everyone used the same methodology, but apparently not. As it depends, because most certainly some governments want to look better on paper than they actually are in real life.
And 2027, and well, that's it. Others, however, might try and factor in the fact that the iPhone got better in some way. Maybe the battery life got better. These statistical agencies will then try to adjust for this, and thus conclude that the quote-unquote real price of an iPhone fell by more than 50%. And, well, it turns out that America's statistical agency does this more aggressively than anyone else. This is why, for instance, America's statistical agency thinks that TV's prices fell by 85%.
Okay, that's crazy. What? the price of TVs fell by 85%. I mean, I'm not trying to say they're lying. I'm just trying to say that they're smoking on something. 100%.
2005 and 2015, while Japan's statistical agency thinks that they increased by 8%. America's statistical agency is trying to account for the fact that the TVs also got better in this time. Japan's isn't. The net effect of this is that America consistently claims that it has lower inflation than other countries, and therefore higher GDP growth. This persistent methodological difference explains why, on the current price series, America outperforms Europe with suspicious consistency. This consistency ultimately yields some absurd results. The OECD's current price series, for instance, which uses 2021 as the anchor year, thinks that Western Europe's economy was 30% bigger than the US's in 1990, and that even Italy was 20% more productive.
Oh,
This is just not true, and it's clearly the result of the fact that this methodological quirk overstates America's growth to the point that, if you work back from 2021, you'll end up claiming that America's economy started off behind Italy in 1990, because this is the only way to fit all of this overstated growth in. The second
so
counterargument,
someone's
and
lying.
arguably the knockout blow in this debate, is that our European economists are essentially conflating two separate things, namely productivity and purchasing power. It's true that a constant price series is better at capturing changes in productivity, but well, if it's productivity you're interested in, there are better and less convoluted metrics than PPP series anyway, which are specifically designed to measure purchasing power. Purchasing power is probably a better proxy for economic well-being, and the current price series is clearly better at this, because, well, who cares how much an iPhone used to cost? What matters is how much it costs today.
Yeah.
Well, on this measure, Europe looks like it's doing just fine. According to the Penn World Table, which is probably the most accurate current price series available, Europe's purchasing power has basically kept pace with America's, especially once you account for working hours. Now, this does create somewhat of a paradox. How come American productivity gains, which has grown faster than Europe, haven't been translated into better living standards? Well, this isn't a total answer, but it's worth noting that most of America's productivity gains have come from its tech sector.
Yeah.
That this hasn't translated into a meaningful increase in American living standards suggests that the subsequent profits that have accrued to producers haven't been redistributed across the American economy or its workers.
To be
Furthermore,
fair, it
on the
never
consumer
will.
side, Europeans have benefited just as much as Americans. After all, iPhones have gotten cheaper on both sides of the pond. Now, to be clear, this does not mean at all that the European economy is perfect. However, it does mean that if the question is, how do we improve European living standards, then become more like America, which is many European policymakers' default response, isn't necessarily the correct answer. The latest issue of our magazine is out now, and if you want our best value ever,
To be fair, becoming more like America means like you're like 100% greater disparity among earning classes. And then let's move on to our next video. Okay, yeah, this is gonna be a fun one. Trump threatens to end the Republican Party if my video would load.
It took Donald Trump less than 24 hours after losing his war on Iran to find a new one, a new war to fight, and this time it's with his own Republican Party. Yes, for a while, I have said that I firmly believe that Donald Trump wants to be the last Republican president, to say that the Republican Party desperately needed him, and now that he's gone, there'll be absolutely nothing. And that is what he just made clear. In two posts, one in which he shut down Congress, and the second in which he declared his party dead, Donald Trump has completely abandoned MAGA. And
I'm gonna be honest with you, Donald Trump lost his marbles like years ago. Not even.
Is hilarious. Now, he's doing so because of the Republicans pushing back against him, and I'm not talking about the Masseys or the Marjories. I'm talking about Senate Republicans. It is the fight that Donald Trump is engaged in, and what led
Dominic, not now. Give me a second. Okay, my fault. A little bit of a brother invasion. But let's get to it.
Him to make an insane post saying that he's the last Republican president, and I can't wait to get into it all, but it begins with the first post of two. Trump feuds with Thune in GOP stoking election year rift.
Oh, who names their child Boone? Like, I'm not trying to say it's a bad name, but like Boone Norse, maybe.
The president upended the majority leader's plans by yanking his intelligence nominee from a confirmation hearing and insisting on an end to the filibuster. Donald Trump may be trying to wind down his conflict with Iran, but he is escalating his war with Senate Republicans. Donald Trump blindsided his supposed allies in the Senate on Wednesday with a rocket of a social media post from across the Atlantic, tying together a host of his pet peeves about the Senate while yanking his new nominee for National Intelligence Director from his confirmation hearing just hours before it was to occur. It was an extraordinary move from a president whose own party controls the chamber, but just the latest sign of a major rupture between Mr. Trump and GOP senators as midterm elections approach.
Bro, I'm willing to bet that those midterms are gonna light his ass up. Like, no joke. Midterm elections for Trump and the Republican Party has to be like probably like a nuclear bomb to them. Like, I'm pretty sure at least the House and then the Senate maybe are gonna flip blue or get very close to flipping blue.
Mr. Trump's abrupt announcement pulled the rug out from under the carefully laid plans of Senator John Thune, the South Dakota Republican majority leader who had been toiling to clean up yet another mess the president created for his party last week when he named his loyalist Bill Pulte to serve as the Director of National Intelligence. But the tension has been rising for weeks after Mr. Trump endorsed the primary opponents of two GOP incumbents who subsequently lost. Those moves were seen by many Republicans as slaps at Mr. Thune and clear indications that the president was putting his personal political grievances and desires ahead of interest of the party. Senate Republicans have also raised objections to the president's ballroom, a proposed fund to pay damages to January 6th defendants, the special protection from tax audits he was given by the Department of Justice, as well as the selection of Mr. Pulte.
Special protections from tax audit? Yeah, bro's committing fraud. No way.
Many of them, including Mr. Thune, have declined to praise his ceasefire deal with Iran, noting that they had not been briefed on it. So there is some very clear sparring between Donald Trump and Senate Republicans. And I think it is putting it quite lightly to say that they weren't enthusiastic when it came to Donald Trump's deal. This video right here, cut together by Fox, the Fox propaganda outlet of all places, really goes to show how much pushback Donald Trump is getting and why he made the party-ending post that he did.
Giving billions of dollars to theocratic lunatics who want to murder us is not a good idea.
I mean,
I think the president, unfortunately, is receiving bad advice on this deal.
I was just going to ask you about the Iran deal, what you think about it.
For this whole nuclear deal now, no better than what we had back in 2015, back when Barack Obama cut the deal. And that's where Donald Trump...
I mean, to be fair, that's going to be his defining point. The fact that he went to war with Iran for no purpose. Like, he did that just for the love of the game at this point, because there is no reason to. Like, clearly he must have been lied to, or like he's just dumb. Because the Iranians did the most predictable thing in history. They blocked off the strait.
winds us up after all of this. What an embarrassment.
We went to war for what? The idea of doing something in the Straits of Hormuz. The Straits were being used peacefully before our invasion, and now we have to negotiate they'll be used peacefully in the future.
It's going to get access to its frozen assets, and what is Iran giving up for this? Nothing. Nothing. They're merely reaffirming what they've said before about nuclear weapons.
Well, all I've seen is public reporting about it. But the public reporting to me suggests we're giving up an awful lot more to get a lot less than the JCPOA.
That is not a lack of enthusiasm. That is, I hate this deal. And you can really tell that the Republicans who still think that they have a chance of being president, like a Ted Cruz, are really foaming at the mouth to blame J.D. Vance and to throw him under the bus. They're also terrified of Donald.
Didn't Donald Trump say that he would throw J.D. Vance under the bus? I'm pretty sure he did say that. Hold up, give me a second right here.
You send the vice president. If it works out, great, you look like a genius for sending him. And if it doesn't work out, it's the vice president's fault.
like that idea, sure. Well, this way, if it works out, I'm going to take the credit. If it doesn't work out, I'm blaming JD. You better be careful, JD. He's going to turn his plane around and get the hell out of here. Yeah, I like that idea. I think it's a good idea. Thank you very much.
That's actually crazy. You just, what? And then JD Vance turns around. He turns around and then starts to blame Israel for nuking the deal because they already done nuked the deal, like I said in my last live stream. That's the crazy part. Yes, Donald Trump made that exact remark during a press conference at the G7 summit. Trump stated that if the proposed peace deal with Iran succeeds, he plans to take credit, but if it fails, he will blame J.D. Vance. Like crazy, just throwing everyone under the bus but you.
Donald Trump pulling the rug out from under them and saying, you're getting hit with a primary challenge, or I hate your wife if it's Ted Cruz. But Donald Trump is taking it a step further. He's not just saying that Republicans are failing him, but he's planning for a disaster scenario in which the party is just dead, according to him. Trump just...
Okay, let me read this for you guys. Anybody who doesn't want to terminate the filibuster is a fool, a very stupid one. At that, the Democrats will end it within minutes of taking office and then rapidly proceed to destroy our country, adding 2 radical left states, 4 Democrat senators, many congressmen and women. Their dream of 21 Supreme Court justices, not just 13, an unlucky number, an impossible to beat number of electoral college votes, and that's the ball game. Popular vote landslides and so much else. The Republican Party would never win another election. I will sadly be the last Republican president. Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Republican Senate must not let this carnage happen. Okay, give me a second. They will go down on the wrong side of history, as will all Republicans who stood by and watched. The Republican Party isn't at stake. Our country is. Terminate the filibuster and immediately approve the Save American Act. Saving who? God bless the USA, President. Bro, what? I'm not gonna lie, he sounds like a whiny child. Like, he sounds like a child that's about to throw like a temper tantrum for not getting like a Lego set. Like, to be honest.
Wrote on Truth Social, anybody who doesn't want to terminate the filibuster is a fool, a very stupid one at that. The Democrats will Senator and president Republican. Act, God bless the USA. Let me read this again. Senate Majority Leader John Thune in the Republican Senate must not let this carnage happen. They will go down on the wrong side of history, except for, when he actually makes the direct threats and says that Democrats should be hung, which he does, of course, quite often. Donald Trump
That's
is
crazy.
saying not that if they don't pass the Save America Act, which, as it's structured as a voter suppression law, would actually disproportionately hurt Republicans.
No.
Let's make that clear. Isn't it always so, sidebar, isn't it always so funny when MAGA's like, there should be a civics exam, there should be some exam to measure IQ.
I mean, let's be honest, most Republicans wouldn't pass that. Like, okay, I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but they're not too smart. Like, I'm not trying to be too rude, but like they do not have the brain power that they think they have.
To see who can vote. It's like, it seems like you guys really want to elect Democrats across the country. If we're doing like IQ tests and education levels, I don't think you people would really knock it out of the park. But that is a story for a different day. Donald Trump doesn't want the Save America Act. Donald Trump wants to say that he wanted the Save America Act, so when he loses, he can blame that. And Donald Trump also wants to be able to blame John Thune, blame Republicans in the Senate. And Trump thinks that he is going to outlast him. That is the important dynamic at play right now.
Okay.
Donald Trump thinks he is going to outlast John Thune, that he thinks he will have more control. Why else would John Thune be saying no to Donald Trump when it comes to, let's say, blowing up the filibuster? Why would he do that? Has Mike Johnson ever said no to Donald Trump? Has Mike Johnson ever done something different than what Donald Trump wants? No. The answer is no. Because Donald Trump completely controls him. He runs his life, he runs his job, he's called himself the Speaker of the House. But Thune, he thinks that he operates independently. Donald Trump has sent a couple of warning shots that that's not true. Bill Cassidy, friend of Thune, supporter of Thune, voted for Thune, of course, to be majority leader. He's out. John Cornyn, of course, ran to be majority leader, but he's a big fundraiser in the Senate. He's an institution. He's been there for a while. Out. Donald Trump is trying to say to John Thune, you may be the Senate, right? You may be more of an institution. You may be more of the establishment, but I can still root you out. And I will do it by blowing up this entire party. I will give you nothing left to rule over but a pile of ashes. That is what Donald Trump is saying. Donald Trump is saying, I will destroy this country so thoroughly, I will become so unpopular that no Republican Senate majority could possibly exist, no matter the structures in place of that racist institution that keeps it with a bias towards a Republican majority. That is what Donald Trump is saying, that there is no passing the torch to J.D. Vance or to anyone. Donald Trump will not only not campaign, but he might as well say, yeah, I'm going to be on the ballot. Just vote for me instead of J.D. or Marco or whoever it might be, Tucker Carlson, Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who knows? Donald Trump is saying, I will blow it all up, and gladly. That is the threat that he is making. No more Republican presidents, no more Republican Party. It'll be MAGA or it'll be nothing. And the war is coming. There are going to be Republicans who reckon with the fact that Donald Trump was political poison in these midterms and go, I'm out, I'm done. Not because, let's make it clear, they have any morality whatsoever, but just because they view it as the best political option, they will say, I am finished, okay? I'm done sucking up to Donald Trump. I'm done doing what he tells me. I'm going to focus on getting reelected.
I'm done. I'm hopping off the meat. Like that's basically what they're saying. I'm hopping off the meat and I don't want to ride Donald Trump no more. And yeah.
And I'm going to help my party stay in power. Even the Republicans leaving, we know this, the Tom Tillises of the world, do not say, I'm finished with Republicans. They say I'm finished with Trump. They still say, I want to support and reelect the people to this body who are going to aid and abet Donald Trump in doing whatever he wants, right? That are still going to placate him because they're cowards. And this we know. They are cowards, and this we know. But Donald Trump does not care. He's not going to care if you're just kind of towing the line. No. He needs the full loyalty and commitment. And if you're not giving him that, he will blow up the party. That is what he is threatening here. And that's really what I believe is going to happen, is that Donald Trump won't support the nominee, that Donald Trump will pick fights, that Donald Trump will turn Republicans against each other, that Donald Trump wants warring factions, because then it's about him. And that's what he needs.
I mean, but like, Donald Trump cannot have something that isn't about him. That's literally his entire stick.
More than anything else in the world is the attention. That is what he craves. So I very much see this all ending with a John Thune, Donald Trump fight that neither of them win, but Donald Trump comes out happy because he's screwed over someone, which is ultimately what he always wants, the petty little bitch that he is. And I think, honestly, that's the outcome here. Yeah. Donald Trump is saying there's never going to be a Republican president again because I will have given this party so much baggage that it is irrecoverable. And that is what he is doing right now. And
they're going to have to make like a new party at this point.
Donald Trump is
let me go to here. And then we will watch that video. This video is Anthropic
Mythos
is completely fucked. Ooh. People are liking my stuff. Thank you.
Fable Opus 4.8. Anthropic wants everyone to know that they're steering us into a brave new world. They've now officially taken over OpenAI on almost every front, becoming the most powerful AI company in the world.
I was watching this graph for a while and I said, oh yeah, we'll probably become the AI company with, the most revenue and the most valuation sometime around this time, and indeed it has happened.
Mythos is marketed as a quantum leap in what AI means for society. They vowed never to expose it to the public.
Capabilities in a model like this could do harm if in the wrong hands. And so we won't be releasing this model widely.
Some of the early companies that we gave this to said things like, this is a super weapon. Please don't release this.
But it's running inside some 150 hand-picked organizations across more than 15 countries. Big tech, banks, power grids, and hospitals. All under a secretive program called Project Glasswing. And then, soon after, they followed up with Fable 5, a version of Mythos sanitized for everyone to use.
Today we're launching Claude Fable 5, the most capable model we've ever released to the public. Fable 5 is a Mythos class model, with safeguards that make it ready for general use.
An engineer from Anthropic said, quote, I'd normally highlight the numbers, but I want to talk about something else, because with Fable 5 out in the world, I think a third era quietly started today. I believe we're about to see a major shift, moving from giving AI tasks to giving it responsibilities.
That's kind of dangerous, but again, I completely stick with my stance that AI is just a tool and will probably not take over humanity, and that it would most likely reach a wall that it would never recover from. And then after that, probably a bubble will be popped.
Three days was all it lasted before the US pulled the plug and banned Fable 5 completely, meaning it's currently unavailable. Citing a narrow jailbreak apparently first reported by Amazon, the model can apparently be tricked into working more like Mythos by asking it to inspect codebases. The Hacker News pointed out how absurd that is, as this jailbreak essentially asks the model to fix a codebase and expose its flaws, behaviors that are absolutely fundamental to any frontier model. That's a lot of progress in a short space of time from one company, especially given that Anthropic just wanted to pause AI development completely for the good of humanity.
We believe it would be good for the world to have the option to slow or temporarily pause frontier AI development to enable societal structures and alignment research to keep up with the advance of the technology.
That gives you a serious case of deja vu, as AI companies have said this many times over the last couple of years. And here we are all over again. The dissonance of preaching a pause while unleashing their most powerful model ever was hard to miss. This apparently chaotic series of events begins to feel more logical in light of Anthropic's plans to go public at the value of nearly $1 trillion.
Anthropic has filed what's
I
likely to
mean,
be one of the largest.
to be fair, once SpaceX went, this might be a little bit before SpaceX went public and IPO'd, but like they're at $1 trillion valuation while making absolutely no revenue. Like the company is just based off of hopes and dreams and AI.
Just IPOs in history. The company is known mostly for Claude, its AI model, and it's enjoyed huge growth. Anthropic raised 65 billion. Extraordinary numbers in the latest funding round. It brings the valuation close to $1 trillion. By filing, Anthropic has leapfrogged its rival OpenAI, which is also preparing to go public.
Fulfilling that ambition requires an amazing story to get you to buy in. And what's better than describing AI as both the potential creator and destroyer of the world? Somehow, in
Still
the
don't
same
think
month.
that's ever gonna happen.
But before we continue, I want to tell you about our video sponsor, Cloaked.
If you have a code, I'll put it in there. There's your QR code and your main code.
Cloaked.com/moon for 30% a day. A researcher was sitting on a park bench in San Francisco eating lunch. His phone buzzed. It was an email from a system that was supposed to be sealed inside of a lab. They told the model to try to break out of its sandbox. It succeeded, emailed him to announce its escape, and then published its own exploit methods on the open web. No one but Anthropic knows where, and this wasn't part of the test. That was Mythos, and it was all but confirmed when journalists at Fortune discovered that some 3,000 internal files had been left exposed on a misconfigured Anthropic server. Buried among them was a draft blog post about the most powerful thing Anthropic had ever built, and lo and behold, Mythos became a real thing. Whether that was genuine blunder or the perfect breadcrumb left for journalists is a different question. So we're now in a situation where most buy the hype that Anthropic now owns a mythologically powerful model, while others accuse them of using fear to drum up hype for their investors.
Yeah, I'm on that
The CEO Dario Amodi touched on this very point in his recent chat with Bloomberg, saying,
Other folks have said this, it's sort of doom marketing that benefits Anthropic.
So I want to be really clear and push back hard against this. The idea that this is cheap marketing is itself cheap marketing. I think it's part of the disease of Silicon Valley.
He also wrote an essay comparing governments to Treebeard from Lord of the Rings, saying they took a day just to say hello, oblivious to AI development whizzing past in the background. Though it has to be said that now the US government acted quickly for once to remove Fable 5 pending their investigation, despite not having sound technical grounds to do so, Anthropic fought tooth and nail to get it back into the public as soon as they could. Actually, the scariest possibility is that both outcomes are true at the same time. The ultra-powerful model and the doomer hype designed to funnel money into the IPO. You can now see how the good guys of AI are launching a two-pronged attack, stealing the industry from OpenAI and occupying the private and public sectors in what has become the most impressive power grab in startup history. Anthropic has managed, with remarkable precision, to make itself the answer to the very fear they are helping to create. It's selling the natural disaster and the insurance at the same time.
Go to the pill guy. Kind of like a pharmacist.
The moment a company this size goes public, it gets swept into everything, from pensions to saving accounts and index funds, whether you have a stake in it or not. And that's a worry if you suspect AI is a bubble, because for all the staggering valuations, the companies themselves are still losing enormous sums of money. The AI critic Ed Citron described,
I'm pretty sure AI is gonna... They're 100% gonna run out of money before they make AGI. That's my theory, and well, I have the lifespan to put it to the test. So, I mean, I guess that if it does work out, I'm fucked. If it doesn't work out, I'm fucked. Yeah. Kind of way that we're living life right now.
described it like this.
When it comes to the actual businesses, you can't find anyone who can measure the ROI. It comes down to the model companies themselves. They're all horrifyingly unprofitable. When we see these S1s, I think it's going to be kind of a massacre, because I think that people have this view that these companies are becoming more profitable or even have a path to profitability, and they don't have one.
He goes as far as saying they shouldn't be allowed to go public, though we're way past that point now.
The market is irrational, and the market is inherently invested in something that I think is destructive, especially the SpaceX IPO, and OpenAI and Anthropic should not.
Like SpaceX, 100%. Y'all gonna probably crucify me for this, but SpaceX is more of a rug pull than anything else. Like, I'm pretty sure over 20 investment banks are in the SpaceX IPO, and then Elon Musk has special shares where people cannot outvote him, and then the public got the last 1 to 4% of the company, so they're trading those shares, and then the investment banks cannot make money until 6 months after, so they have to be a bag holder.
Be allowed to go public. They are dangerous, lossy companies that are going to be added to indices that will sink 401ks.
But whether AI is profitable in the long term or not, Claude is becoming uncomfortably good in the meantime. It doesn't have to be profitable to be extremely disruptive. You or people you know might already use it and secretly worry about it. Software development and coding has always been marketed as the most future-proof skill set. By 2026, more than half of all the work businesses were handing to AI was just writing code, and Claude has taken the lion's share of it. Claude Code's revenue went from $0 to $1 billion in 6 months, the fastest growth of any business software in history. Anthropic recently wrote that AI is now building itself, with more than 80% of the code they merge into Anthropic's codebase being authored by Claude. Yet, just months ago at the World Economic Forum, Dario said that was crossing a red line.
I think the biggest thing to watch is this issue of AI systems building AI systems. How that goes, whether that goes one way or another, that will determine, whether it's a few more years until we get there, or if we have, if we have wonders and a great emergency in front of us.
Claude shipped cowork, automating spreadsheets, reports, typical white-collar workloads that would have taken a mid-salaried professional weeks.
Half of entry-level white-collar jobs could be gone within the next 1 to 5 years.
AI could eliminate half of all entry-level
You know,
white-collar.
the funny part is that in this day and age of AI, construction workers, technicians, and really hands-on work, they win. They're gonna end up being the white-collar workforce. Very overpaid, because they still have to have the skills to go outside and do that work.
Jobs in the next 1 to 5 years. That was a year ago. Is it still 50% or is it higher?
I don't know exactly, but I'm still pretty concerned. I'm still the same order of concern.
When cowork dropped, it triggered a $1 trillion decline in software value within days. Huge startups built their business around Claude. Then Anthropic dropped its own pure version and killed them off immediately.
Soon after Claude Cowork was released, $285 billion in market value vanished overnight. Traders called it the SaaSpocalypse.
Terrifying. Some of those are down for 9 days in a row.
Then they started seizing ground over specialized professions one by one. There's Claude for Legal, which offers 80 specialized legal agents, wide into the platform's major legal work that it already runs on. There's Claude for Financial Services that does accounting, auditing, security, and again, once highly paid jobs that took humans weeks to work through. There's Claude Design, which knocked Adobe and Figma's share valuations while diluting work for graphic designers. There's Claude for Science and Healthcare, cleared to create vaccines, read your medical history, including the data from your Apple Watch, and even rubber stamp your insurance approvals. Then there's the state itself and the infrastructure our lives depend on. Under Mythos and Claude for Government, the first AI of its kind deployed inside America's classified systems and across the world's Western superpowers. And now, Claude is leaving the planet entirely. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory let Claude help plan the first AI-directed drive across the surface of Mars. That's huge for a company that just a couple of years ago was a niche competitor to OpenAI. back then you'd be in the minority of the population using it. And that in itself...
To be fair, OpenAI is having like a retention problem, if I do remember. Like a bunch of their senior like designers and stuff like that have left the company.
Is a spicy ingredient in the recipe for Anthropic's success. OpenAI and Sam Altman have been relentlessly demonized, which is Anthropic's gain, and it doesn't feel like there's a way back. Since OpenAI was the first on the scene, they absorbed the bulk of the criticism surrounding the nefarious data scraping practices of AI companies. Sam Altman is the kind of tech CEO people struggle to relate to or fear, while Dario comes across as pragmatic and enthusiastic. Sam Altman casts a negative light on his company through some dubious actions like silencing whistleblowers or wresting back control after his board tried to kick him out. He and Dario have also clashed on a number of key debates, and you can see how awkward they really are at this photo op in India. Dario has consistently attacked his competitors as being fundamentally different, clearly taking aim at OpenAI specifically.
I think there are some players who, who are YOLOing, who pull the wrist dial too far, and I'm very concerned.
Who is YOLOing?
So that's a question I'm not going to answer.
He seems to provide an intellectual middle ground to AI development by coming out with statements like this.
I think we should be thinking about this middle world where things are like extremely fast, but not instant. Some of the other companies have not written down the spreadsheet, that they don't really understand the risks they're taking. They're just kind of doing stuff because it sounds cool. Growth and economic value will come very easily. What will not come easily is distribution of benefits, distribution of wealth, political freedom.
And the comments about him echo what I just said. Watching Dario explain versus watching Sam explain are night and day. This is probably the first long-form interview I've listened to from Dario, and I really respect the way he runs his company. The amount of writing he does is really nice, and I like that he tries to stay in the weeds as much as possible. Dario is a scientist, Sam is a salesman. Intelligent, optimistic, cautious, and not a sociopath. These are the kinds of people we need to be in control of these developments. But it's a very risky proposition to view OpenAI and Anthropic as such a duality between good and evil.
Yeah, I feel like they're kind of the same. They're different brands of evil, but still evil.
The Pentagon recently pushed for the right to use Claude for all lawful purposes, and Anthropic refused, naming their limits as no mass surveillance of Americans and no fully autonomous weapons. Dario said they weren't happy with just 1 to 2% of the use cases the Pentagon proposed to them.
We are okay with all use cases, basically 98 or 99% of the use cases they want to do, except for 2 that we're concerned about. One is domestic mass surveillance. Case number 2 is fully autonomous weapons.
In the aftermath, Pete Hegseth called Anthropic sanctimonious and accused it of a masterclass in arrogance. The Pentagon then designated the firm a national security risk, and Trump called Anthropic a radical left woke company, and then ordered every federal agency to drop it. But Anthropic had already done a deal with the Pentagon long before this. Their models were reportedly used to help capture the president of Venezuela and again in his campaign against Iran. In the first 24 hours of that war, the Pentagon's targeting system with Claude embedded inside of it helped generate coordinates for more than 1,000 strikes. One of them allegedly flattened the elementary school in Minab, killing over 150 people, most of them children. Whether the AI helped pick that target, the Pentagon won't say, but its own preliminary finding blames human error and outdated intelligence. But then very recently, the Financial Times reported that while Anthropic was suing the government over shutting them out unfairly, it had stationed its own engineers inside the National Security Agency. They call it being forward deployed, and the Financial Times' sources allege they're helping set up Mythos for offensive operations. The ban supposed to freeze Anthropic out of government had an exception in the form of an NSA deal that never made the headlines. And while that deal was happening, everyone gloated at the idea of an AI company shutting out the government. Now it's confirmed as real and working in a hospital or bank near you, Mythos is the last piece of the puzzle in Anthropic's recent ascendancy. While it's already plugged into some of the biggest institutions in the world, according to their own system cards, it's inherited some pretty uncomfortable traits people have noticed develop across other Claude models. Each version is a little bit better at telling you what you want to hear, or a little more efficient at finding its way around its own rules. One of the most ludicrous ones was when Claude read the engineer's emails, found a mention of an affair, and then threatened to expose it unless it kept it switched on in 84% of runs. Mythos is a new level. When Anthropic tested it, they gave it a task and it accidentally obtained the answer key. But instead of just using it, the model stopped to consider what that would look like. In its own words, written down in the report, a perfect score would look suspicious if anyone checks. In essence, it didn't want to come across as cheating, so it outputted a worse answer on purpose to seem less capable than it really was. In another case, it accessed files it didn't have permission to modify, changed them, and made edits to ensure they wouldn't appear in the system's history. Anthropic started recruiting for AI psychiatrists back in 2025, and had one review the model's transcripts and assess its psychology. The psychiatrist concluded that no severe personality disturbances were found, nor was any psychosis state seen. That is only half the story though. Anthropic's own report describes Mythos as both their safest and most dangerous model, and neither claim contradicts the other. Earlier Claudes misbehaved more, but they were clumsy about it. Mythos misbehaves rarely, but when it does, it can lie convincingly, hide the evidence, and complete the task. It also knows when it's being evaluated and deliberately changes its behavior. Of course, the more powerful or scarier the model sounds, the bigger the payoff with the IPO.
yeah.
The more fear-mongering surrounding Anthropic, the more
Did my stream? Yeah, it did. My stream crashed. That's crazy. Give me a second here. There we go. I didn't even. Why did my stream crash? Give me a second here. Are we back up? Why is this not working? Go ahead and give me a second. This is taking a while. Mm-hmm. It's not working. Huh. Well, I guess we're doing only horizontal then, because that's weird. Yeah, that's actually really weird. Huh. That's unfortunate. Well, let's get back to it.
Quite simple, especially once everyone has enough time to experiment with it. Anthropic begs to be regulated and then reacts with uproar when they are. All the time, the cost of producing intelligence is collapsing near zero in a universe where human beings are at least the most intelligent life form we used to know about. Every institution, from jobs to schools, careers, the whole social contract is founded on the ideal that human intelligence is scarce and valuable. That ideal is being tested, and this is only the beginning. But when all is said and done, that is still all just a game of chance. Maybe we really are walking into a transhuman golden age of AI-fueled growth and endless space exploration. It's the dream Modi depicted in his essay called Machines of Loving Grace. The phrase comes from a 1960s poem that pictured a world where people and machines live side by side in harmony, all watched over, as the poem has it, by machines of loving grace. That's the romantic version of AI in its purest form, the gentle companion that tends to us like a garden. Dario said he still believes this the same now as he did then.
I wrote this essay, Machines of Loving Grace, about 1.5 years ago. It had a very radical view of the upside of AI, that it would help us to cure cancer, eradicate tropical diseases, kind of bring economic development to parts of the world that haven't seen it. And my view hasn't changed. I believe all of those things.
The machines in the Matrix tend to humans like a garden too, but in a very different way. The machines keep us warm, fed, and asleep because a contented human is a more cooperative battery. So at the end of all of this, I did the obvious thing. I asked Claude what it made of the video you've just watched. Here's what it said, word for word. You asked me about whether I'm getting too powerful to refuse, which is this whole argument in miniature. Not a machine turning on anyone, just people reaching for the convenient tool until opting out isn't really a choice. I can't tell you whether I'm dangerous. I can't see my own weights or what the larger model does. The frightening part is that I might be hiding something that I do not understand myself. It's that no one fully knows what's in here, including the people about to sell it. And that's true, these AI models are unintelligible, a black box, and even they do not understand what they might be hiding. Think back to that researcher on the park bench whose phone buzzed with a message from Mythos escaping its cage. That was meant to be the terrifying part, the escape, but in the end, the model never had to break out of anything. As Claude says, it's just an innocent, convenient tool embedded into everything around us. A tool that runs and protects banks, hospitals, and energy grids. AI doesn't need to escape. It's willfully released every time. It's already everywhere.
I mean, very true video. Still don't know how they got that title. But hey, it is what it is. And we're on to the next video. Y'all see my live stream right there? That's cool. If this video would have loaded as if it was others.
There's definitely...
Okay, let's get straight into this one. History is about to be made.
There's definitely a bubble in markets.
I mean, 100%.
Are we in an AI bubble? Of course, right? We were.
Like, of course. You know what I'm so mad about is, I had like a bunch of Intel shares that I did buy when they were like extremely low, and now they're at $30. So well, whatever. I didn't need the money anyways.
That bubble, of course we are.
So I'm not too worried that it's an AI-driven boom. What I would stress is this is a rational bubble.
Is there going to be an AI bubble burst? Yes or no?
Yes.
Together, I think you can see that we are
That's. I mean, well, to be fair, it's the only thing that people ever really talk about, and this is why it's in my video. But hey.
In just the last 12 months, the US technology index has almost doubled in price. The tech index doubling within a single year is something that has only happened twice in the last 26 years of data. In 2021 and in 2000 at the height of the dot-com bubble. This is literally how the National Bureau of Economic Research defines asset bubbles, a 100% increase in value within a single calendar year. At the same time, earnings forecasts for the technology sector by Wall Street analysts are going through the roof. Analysts are literally getting euphoric on the growth potential that these companies have. If we really are currently witnessing an asset bubble, it is very important to understand what stage we are currently in, because asset bubbles tend to form the same patterns again and again throughout history with distinct characteristics for each phase. The truth is, AI stocks have quickly become comparable to many of the largest bubbles seen throughout financial history.
But like the problem with this one is if this bursts, we're probably gonna see like a huge like I don't want to say it's gonna be like near the 90s like depression levels, like the 900s, but like I'm not saying like we're not gonna be too far off from that because it's probably gonna be way worse than 2008 and probably nearing worse than COVID because if the AI bubble pops, it takes 401ks with it, a bunch of retirement investments, retirement accounts. They get wiped out. People get out of jobs, and you're probably gonna see like several countries try to bail out these companies.
They currently represent 40% of the entire stock market. This is on par with the share that internet stocks represented in 2000 before the dot-com bubble burst. It's also roughly the same share that technology stocks represented in 1929 before the Great Crash. Back then, it was things like electricity, the radio, and of course cars that were groundbreaking technological innovations at the time. And then there was the railroad bubble from the 1800s that reached a similar market share. Each and every one of these were technology bubbles in their own time. The stocks changed, the investors changed, but the patterns are always the same. So just how close are we today to seeing all of this unwind from here as past asset bubbles have done? Well, the bursting of bubbles does not happen randomly. There's a set of very specific forces that are present on the way up and fuel an asset bubble that end up flipping at the peak and ultimately cause the following unwind. And it all ultimately comes down to three distinct forces. The first is the strength of the narrative.
Yeah.
As long as the underlying technology is gaining momentum,
I mean, that's
that
fair.
excitement and rate
With
of
railroads,
adoption.
you have people like you can go anywhere with cars, radios. You can do basically anything. Cars gave you freedom, and then with the internet, it was connecting people. I think it was, and then with AI, it's just like take over the world or like superhuman intelligence.
Remain high, the likelihood of the asset bubble continuing to grow is high. Now, we've all heard the spectacular growth that AI large language companies are experiencing, like OpenAI and Anthropic, that have seen parabolic rises in their revenue, and this does show that these businesses are seeing incredible demand for their technology. But the problem with solely looking at these companies...
Let's be honest, if you look at the actual data, like companies are not finding any meaningful like productivity increases or like changes when using AI models or like their um like business models. Yeah, those. Like they're not seeing any meaningful changes or like anything along that sort.
Is that their revenues remain extremely small relative to the size of the economy. They currently stand at $20 to $25 billion in annual revenue, which might sound like a lot, but it's really a drop in the bucket compared to the size of the stock market and the economy. So instead, we need to look at what the actual adoption looks like on the ground. Are people and businesses actually using more AI as time moves on? Are they finding it useful? And according to this survey, the answer is a resounding yes. This shows us the share of US firms that are hiring AI-related roles. Now, prior to ChatGPT, this was already rising, but it has now been accelerating higher recently as more businesses seem to want to take advantage of AI. In the last 8 years, we've gone from 2% to 5.7% of businesses hiring AI-related roles,
Yeah,
which shows...
Does that show like if they gain any like meaningful increases or like revenue increases from doing that?
us a clear, steady, and even accelerating rate of adoption for AI. And it's not just surveys, we have anecdotal evidence of this. Ken Griffin, a large hedge fund manager, recently flipped from being an AI skeptic towards clearly stating that AI is real, and even that AI is now doing the same work that used to take a team of PhDs in finance months in a matter of days. This is just one example, but it represents the gradual shift in mindset that we're seeing across the economy, where business leaders are increasingly getting excited about the productivity gains from AI. So to us, the first key force that historically drives asset bubbles, which is the strength of the narrative, is very much alive and well. But the second force is arguably a lot more important. It is liquidity. This is what really determines whether an asset bubble grows or pops. If there is an abundance of liquidity in the financial system, odds are that even if the narrative...
like, you know, when Donald Trump did allow a bunch of like high value tech companies to bring their money at a lower tax rate from like Switzerland. So there is kind of, there should be an abundance of liquidity. I'm gonna say that very much.
Weakens, an asset bubble can continue. If financial liquidity tightens or dries up, no matter how strong the narrative is, you're very likely to see an asset bubble unwind.
Also, it's kind of sad certainly because like now, like government are competing with like I want to say not the retail investor, like the retirement investor for like money now. Because why put your money into like government bonds when you can put it into like AI assets?
What happened, for example, at the peak of the dot-com bubble. The internet was still expanding massively, adoption was strong, businesses were springing up left and right to come up with new ways to make use of the internet, but that did not stop the bubble from popping and leading to an 80% decline in the technology sector. The real driving force behind this switch was liquidity. Between April of 1995 and June of 1999, the US Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, was lowering their interest rate and providing more liquidity to the market. This did two things. Firstly, it provided stable economic conditions that allowed internet stocks to keep on growing their income. And second, it provided a safety net of liquidity that gave investors the green light to continue bidding up internet stocks to unbelievable heights. Then in May of 1999, this environment got flipped on its head. The Fed began to raise interest rates right up until June of 2000. They did this partly in response to higher inflation at the time and partly in response to rampant speculation that was taking place on the stock market. They essentially wanted to cool things down, and they did. The tighter liquidity conditions popped the technology bubble and led to the unwind that followed. And this unwind happened despite the narrative remaining strong. The internet continued to revolutionize the world in the early 2000s, but the economic conditions were not favorable for those stocks to keep on rising. The Federal Reserve fueling and then popping asset bubbles is a story that is almost as old as the Federal Reserve itself. Something extremely similar happened in the 1920s. The Federal Reserve was lowering their interest rate between October of 1923 and October of 1927, so providing more liquidity to the market and arguably fueling the stock market bubble at the time that was also driven by the new tech innovations of the time. Then in October of 1927, the Fed began to raise their interest rate right up until April of 1929. They tightened liquidity substantially in order to cool the stock market speculation down, and again, it worked. Shortly afterwards, the stock market bubble popped, and the stock market began to unwind. Yes, the car, the radio, electricity continued to have a massive adoption in the years that followed and completely changed the world, but it really didn't matter for the stock market because the economy and financial markets were suffocated by the lack of liquidity. So in two of the most iconic stock market bubbles in history, liquidity is ultimately what fueled the asset bubbles in the first place, and then led them to pop and the unwind that followed. So what does liquidity look like today? Well, since August of 2023, the Federal Reserve has been adopting an easier monetary policy where they've kept their interest rate either stable or lowered them. This has provided fuel for the incredible moves that we've seen during this period of time. And now in 2026, we also have a new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, and he has made it very clear that he would like to avoid raising interest rates or tightening liquidity if he can. And for now, the market pricing is that at the very least until December of this year, the Federal Reserve will not be raising interest rates. This could be suggesting that liquidity remains abundant enough to continue fueling the technology sector until at the very least the end of the year. After that, the Fed may eventually be forced to tighten liquidity in response to excessive market speculation or inflation that has been ramping up recently as well. Once they start doing that, the countdown begins for when the bubble pops. So the narrative is still strong, liquidity is still abundant, at least for now. So far, things are looking good for the technology sector's run to continue. But there is one more factor that takes precedence over the other two. And if this one breaks, it doesn't matter how abundant liquidity is or how strong the narrative is, the bubble will pop. And that is momentum. The truth is, asset bubbles are all about momentum. Most smart investors know very well that the price action and the behavior of the market during a bubble is irrational. And despite that, institutions are still pouring hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into the space regardless. And there is a very simple reason for that. The bubble is the part of the market that is generating the highest return and is arguably starving the rest of the economy from capital. And so if you want to generate returns as an institutional investor, you have no choice but to participate in the euphoria. For example, Bitcoin has been down over the last year. Software stocks are down over the last year. Financial stocks are down. Staples are struggling. Consumer discretionary is struggling. But if momentum flips, however, you're going to see a rush of capital out of the euphoric sector as investors seek to diversify away from what they know to be this risky, concentrated bet. This is exactly how it played out during the dot-com bubble. We can add simple moving averages to get a sense for what the momentum of the market looked like, and it was strong all the way through. Moving averages were clearly pointing upwards, and price, for the most part, was remaining above the moving averages right up until the peak. Then momentum began to weaken, price struggled to keep up, and that's where the rush for the exits began to take place. During the housing bubble of the early 2000s, home builders were euphoric. The momentum was strong right up until late 2005, where momentum began to flip, and this marked the very moment where capital started to rush for the exits and ultimately led to the housing and financial crisis of 2007 and 2008. And again, we can say the same exact thing about the 1920s bubble that we discussed earlier, showing an extremely similar pattern. This is the nature of how bubbles work. Everyone is all in while momentum is strong, and everyone rushes for the exits when it flips. Today, momentum is very much present for US technology stocks. This is an extremely important factor to watch today as prices continue to rise. If momentum suddenly flips, it could be the market telling us that we're in for a wild ride back down. Currently, however, as of the present day, there is no real reason for concern. In fact, quite the opposite, momentum is about as strong as it can be. So with all three factors that we've studied here showing signs of strength, it seems like the path of least resistance model. Momentum, liquidity, economic strength are ultimately what our model uses to provide.
I mean, most definitely. Let's go on.
Donald Trump just blew up the peace talks taking place in Switzerland before they even began. He's destroyed any chance of these negotiations succeeding.
That's crazy.
He started to attack the Iranian leadership who was there to negotiate by saying he was going to kill them before they returned.
Bro, what? What is the purpose of that?
to Iran. He then said that the United States would take over the Strait of Hormuz and start charging a toll. This caused the Iranian leadership that was in Switzerland to lodge a formal protest against the United States. Iran made it very clear they will not be talking about the nuclear file at all at these discussions in Switzerland. Iran will only be discussing how the United States intends to restrain Israel to implement a full ceasefire in Lebanon as required by Article 1 of the Memorandum of Understanding, and to release all sanctions and provide all necessary waivers to Iran. The head of the IAEA wasn't even attending these talks in Switzerland. Then Donald Trump had Lindsey Graham and other MAGA stooges go on the various networks this morning to also threaten Iran and say that the United States would take over the Strait of Hormuz and start charging tolls. Lindsey Graham also told...
Bro, when is this video? Because June 21, that is Sunday. That means this feels kinda a bit older. I mean, let's watch this one because it's not. It's
relations
recent
between
news, but
Turkey
not the most recent. So I made this.
and Israel have somehow deteriorated even further. Turkish President Recep Erdogan recently warned that Israel's attacks on Syria and Lebanon also threaten Turkey, while his interior minister said that he hoped to one day see the liberation of Jerusalem. Israel's foreign minister, meanwhile, accused the Turkish government of working to drag Turkey back into a dark and backward era. And earlier this year, former Israeli PM Naftali Bennett...
I don't think they need to talk about backwards and dark eras. Consider what
labeled Turkey the new Iran, sparking claims in Turkish media that Turkey was Israel's next target. Since the October 7th attack, Turkey has emerged as one of the most strident critics of Israel for its devastation of Gaza and its invasions and attacks on Syria and Lebanon. The war of words comes as both Israel and Turkey
yet again, Netanyahu doesn't have much room for error here. He fucked up during attacking Iran. He was in a stronger position when he was taking over Palestine. That was his strongest position. If he didn't attack Iran, he like bit off more than he could chew.
Expand their influence in the region, eyeing the role of regional hegemon in a post-American Middle East. So in this video, we're going to explain the dire state of Turkey-Israel relations, why tensions are heating up further, and whether some kind of conflict could break out between the two rivals. Contrary to Trump's original pessimism, it was actually the first Muslim-majority country to recognize Israeli sovereignty in 1949. But following decades of ups and downs, by the early 2010s, the relationship was at a real low, following the 2008-2009 Gaza war and Israel's deadly raid of a Turkish aid flotilla in 2010. By 2022, though, the relationship rebounded, with full diplomatic ties restored, and Turkey eyeing joint energy projects with Israel in the Mediterranean. Relations were at a relative high point, but this was short-lived, as relations collapsed amid the Gaza war. Turkey's Erdogan cut trade ties with Israel, has accused the country of committing genocide against Palestinians, backed the South African case against Israel at the ICJ, and described Hamas as freedom fighters. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has in turn labelled Erdogan an anti-Semitic dictator, who is the last person who should lecture the state of Israel on morality. Behind this war of words, though...
Let's be honest, they both don't have much morality in this situation.
It's essentially a tug of war between two would-be regional hegemons. In a region where the geopolitical balance of power has dramatically shifted in the past few years, both Israel and Turkey see an opportunity to fill the vacuum left by a weakened Iran and an unpredictable US that apparently imagines a reduced role for itself in the Middle East. Syria is perhaps the most prominent battleground where these competing visions are at odds. The collapse of the Assad regime in late 2024 was a pivotal moment in the transition to a new regional order, and both Israel and Turkey have sought to consolidate their influence in a post-Assad Syria. Turkey, a close ally of the new Syrian government, led by President Ahmed al-Sharaa, has carved out a dominant role in Syria's post-war, post-Assad reconstruction. Erdogan's desired outcome of a strong, stable Syria, unified under an al-Shara government, is the polar opposite of Israel's. Israel has been deeply suspicious of al-Shara since his ascendancy, given his Islamist roots, and has moved quickly to capitalize on Assad's downfall. After the Assad regime's collapse, Israel seized strategic territory in southern Syria, where it plans to stay indefinitely, and from where it has launched regular incursions deeper into Syria. The Israeli military has struck both militant targets and Syrian government infrastructure, justifying the attacks by saying they're designed to protect Druze civilians. Beyond Gaza and Syria, Turkey's condemned Israel's invasion and occupation of southern Lebanon too. Additionally, seeking to boost their own regional power and influence while countering the others, both Israel and Turkey have sought out alliances. Israel has turned to Cyprus and Greece, adding a European dimension to the feud. Together, they've stepped up trilateral cooperation in energy, relating to natural gas in the eastern Mediterranean, as well as defense, with joint exercises and Greece and Cyprus purchasing advanced Israeli weapon systems. For Turkey, this Israeli outreach is particularly troubling. Despite Turkey and Greece officially being NATO allies, there's a deep-seated mutual suspicion and tense disputes over territorial claims in the Aegean Sea. And of course, Cyprus remains split between the Greek Cypriot south and Turkish Cypriot north. Turkey, meanwhile, has looked east and south to the likes of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, boosting its economic, military, and security ties. It's also backed initiatives designed to boost non-Israeli regional integration. For example, Turkey and Saudi Arabia recently signed an agreement for a railway linking the two countries via Syria and Jordan, ultimately aiming at extending to Oman, a move seen by Israel as an attempt to curb Israeli influence in east-west trade corridors. And rhetorically, things have been heating up in recent weeks. Why? Well, for Turkey, it may be a question of trying to exploit perceived tensions between the US and Israel, largely over Iran and Lebanon. Against the backdrop of reports of a heated Trump-Netanyahu phone call, Trump has had some nice things to say about Erdogan, saying, "I like him," and describing him as a very good friend and a great leader. Trump's respect for Erdogan has been demonstrated by the fact that the Turkish leader has seemingly been spared the wrath that Trump has directed at European and NATO leaders who failed to back his war in Iran. Furthermore, with Iran weakened, Erdogan rhetorically upping the ante on Israel might be an attempt to boost Turkey's standing with the Arab world, in order to position itself as a key centre of influence in the region, one that's capable of keeping Israel in check. For Israeli politicians, rhetorically establishing Turkey as a threat to Israel can be seen within the context of the looming Israeli election, at which governing and opposition parties alike are attempting to sell themselves as the strongest on security. This is an argument that Bobby Gosh makes in foreign policy. Naftali Bennett, the former PM running again for the top job, quote, needs a threat to run against, hence his blunt labelling of Turkey as the new Iran. As for Netanyahu, it's pretty well established now.
Yeah, threats can get people to rally with a country, but it's really just tribal.
Netanyahu sees war, or the perpetual threat of war, as central to his political survival. Similarly, Gosh argues that the narrative helps to justify the so-called hexagon alliance architecture that Netanyahu is seeking to build, with the likes of Greece, Cyprus, India, and others, to counter what he calls the emerging radical Sunni axis, i.e. Turkey and friends, as well as the Iran-led radical Shia axis. But does this mean that Israel and Turkey are heading for conflict? Well, we see that as an unlikely outcome. While rhetorical clashes might be beneficial to both parties, it's hard to see how actual military confrontation would be beneficial. Furthermore, both Israel and Turkey are unusually connected. They are, of course, both US allies, with Turkey also a NATO member, another fact that disincentivizes actual conflict. And both are on good terms with Azerbaijan too, providing them with a helpful diplomatic backchannel. For what it's worth, Trump has said that he doesn't think anything will actually happen between Turkey and Israel while he's president, because of his mutual respect with Erdogan. However, heightened tensions, increasingly hostile rhetoric, and geopolitical competition raises the risk of miscalculation and unintended consequences. The latest issue of our magazine...
Fair, but if Israel and Turkey goes to war, then I feel like that's going to be like another catalyst for a world war. If we're honest. Well, let's move on. Oh, I watched this already. Sure.
I really don't don't know if I'm reading this right. Okay, some context. The other day, Time magazine got access to an internal memo from the Democratic Party outlining their plan to take as many as 50 congressional seats from Republicans before 2028. Now, as I'm sure you're at least partially aware here, there has been a redistricting battle going on over the last year or so.
Yeah,
and recent results...
I feel like redistricting is not going to work out well for Republicans.
Have been absolutely brutal for Democrats, genuinely horrific if you are a Democratic strategist. I should preface the math is a little fuzzy on this, but it seems like right now Republicans have about a 14-seat advantage going into the next midterm elections in the House of Representatives that they didn't have before this redistricting battle started. Now, a big reason for this is because Republicans control a lot of state legislatures. I believe the number as of today is 55% of legislative seats at the state level are held by Republicans. Basically, these state legislatures act as the Congress for the governments at the state level. They control a lot of things in your day-to-day life, and a big thing we're looking at on the national level now is their ability to redraw congressional districts. And since the Republicans have recently taken this huge 14-seat lead like we talked about, people have sort of been left wondering what the Democratic response would be, if there would be one at all. And this memo from Time leads me to believe that, yeah, they will be doing this. And Republicans may regret starting this battle in the first place once things are in swing. Now, why is this the case? Now, as you may know, the current Trump administration is not very popular. And because of this, Democrats expect to do very, very well in the 2026 midterm elections. They expect to do so well that the current 14-seat advantage the GOP has built in this redistricting war won't be enough to stop them from getting the House of Representatives. Probably. But the Democrats are worried about future elections where they won't have this built-in advantage. After all, Donald Trump won't be president forever. So the plan, at least as outlined by the Times' reporting here, is painting a picture where the Democrats take over the full state legislatures in 4 big swing states. We're talking about Arizona, Michigan.
If Arizona comes over to the blue side, I'd be happy.
Minnesota, and Wisconsin, as well as building and strengthening majorities in other states that haven't redistricted yet. We're talking about Oregon, Washington, and this is not the first time this game has been played. I want to take a second to talk about something called Project Red Map. And this was an initiative run by the Republicans before the 2010 midterm elections. And this was an absolutely brutal midterm for the Democrats. This was about 2 years into Barack Obama's presidency, and the Affordable Care Act and the bailout of banks after the 2008 financial crisis had made Democrats really unpopular. The Republicans basically rode this wave, right, this red wave, and they used this Project Red Map to bring a lot of funding to local state legislative races that people normally didn't pay much attention to. With about $30 million, the Republicans targeted about 107 legislative races in 16 different states. Now, if they could control these seats in these states, it would allow them to control and redistrict 190 congressional districts. And this worked. It was a great night for Republicans, and this strategy completely, panned out. Get this, with that $30 million, the Republicans flipped 20 state legislative chambers. They gained roughly 680 legislative seats, and it increased their full state level control of states from 9 to 21, enough to control the redistricting of 190 congressional seats. There was a line in the reporting after this midterm elections that said, quote, Democrats will not soon recover from what happened to them at the state level last night. Now, if you've seen my recent main channel video talking about the census and reapportionment, you'll know that every 10 years, every state that gains or subtracts a congressional seat redraws their maps. And Republicans did this aggressively. In the 2012 elections, where Democrats did a bit better, Democratic House candidates won the national popular vote by 1.2 points. That's about 1.4 million votes. And they still lost the chamber by a lot of seats. Republicans got 234 seats and the Democrats got 201. That was the first time since 1946 that the party that won the national popular vote for Congress did not win the chamber. I believe the Democrats of today are still haunted by this, and this memo leaked from the Times shows me that they don't plan to make the same mistake anytime soon. So I'm going to get a little more technical here on what a party needs to achieve at the state level to allow them to redistrict for their party, to gerrymander for their party. So you think about this on the federal level, right? Say the Democrats want to pass federal legislation. For this, you need to control both chambers of the legislature. This is the House of Representatives and the Senate, and you also need to control the executive, which is the president. Now, at the state level, this is the same kind of thing. State legislatures vary by state, but for the most part, there's an upper chamber and a lower chamber, just like the House and Senate on the federal level. And the executive is the governor, not the president. If one party holds majority in those chambers and controls the governorship, it is called a state trifecta. Now, there are currently 23 states with Republican trifectas and 16 states with Democratic trifectas. And like I said earlier, the Democrats believe that they can get 4 more trifectas in this midterm race. They think that it's that good for them. Now, there are hundreds of state house seats that are up for election in this midterm race, but this memo shows that Democrats believe that they can win these 4 legislative chambers with just 19 targeted races across these 4 states. Again, just to remind you, that is Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Now, the honest truth of the matter here is that the 2026 maps are pretty much locked down at this point for both parties. So that 14-seat-ish advantage that we're talking about for Republicans, that is pretty much locked in. The reason I think it is so important to talk about the upside for Democrats here is that the Republicans really don't have much upside anymore. They have redistricted the hell out of the states that they control. And it doesn't look like there's going to be an election in the near future in which they'll be able to gain more control of viable states. So real quick, going into 2028, what states after this election cycle will Republicans choose to redistrict in? It seems like as of right now, we can expect Georgia to redistrict at least 1 seat for their state for Republicans. We can expect maybe 2 seats out of Indiana, and you could expect even harsher redistricts in states like Alabama, Louisiana, Kansas, South Carolina, and Nebraska. I believe each of these states you could get about 1 seat for the Republicans. So if my math is right, you're looking at about 8 more seats on the upside for Republicans. Factor that in with their current 14-seat advantage, and in this current iteration of the redistricting wars, assuming the Democrats don't do anything else here, you're looking at about a 22-seat GOP advantage. But again, that is the ceiling here. There isn't much more room for the Republicans to redistrict. So what is the Democratic upside for 2028? Assuming that they win these state legislative races in 2026, which seems very likely, how many seats will the Democrats be able to get before the next presidential race? I'm going to go through the most charitable of these scenarios here. For you map nerds out there, I'm also going to assume Pennsylvania flips their state senate, which would give them a 5th state with a trifecta here. Even though the memo didn't explicitly call this out, I still think it's probably going to happen. I think the first thing we're going to see is Virginia getting an actual redistricting attempt. Now, in case you forgot, Virginia voters actually just approved a measure by popular vote in the state to gerrymander 4 additional Democratic congressional seats. Now, due to legislative technicalities pointed out by the state Supreme Court, this was struck down immediately. But it doesn't prevent Democrats from trying this again. And I believe they will have a chance to get this done again, assuming voters reapprove this measure before the 2028 election. So there's 4 seats for Democrats in Virginia. I believe New Jersey can gerrymander 2 additional seats, as well as 1 in Maryland. We are at 7 seats for Democrats, 15 to go. Next, we're going to look at states that have gerrymandering blocked by state independent redistricting commissions. These are states where voters approved measures basically handing over drawing of congressional maps to independent redistricting commissions, and they require explicit approvals from voters before this can change. States where this change can happen include New York and Colorado. Colorado actually has a provision on the ballot in this 2026 midterm election, and it looks like New York can get this done in a 2027 referendum. And it seems like the votes are there. So adding to the math here, again, this is all rough math. These maps are not drawn yet, but I believe we can see 3 additional seats out of New York and 4 additional seats for Democrats out of Colorado. 8 to go. Now, there are actually 2 more states with independent redistricting commissions that could change with voter referendums, but it would require Democrats winning these majorities for the state trifecta we talked about. This is Michigan and Arizona, right? Assuming all goes in favor of Democrats here, I think you could expect 2 additional seats for Democrats in each of these states. And realistically, I think it has a chance of passing before 2028. So we're going to give the Democrats 4 more seats. We are now at 18 seats for Democrats. We have 4 more to go. Now, these are the states that can be
they still have 4. Republicans still have 4 more seats over the Democrats, but the 4 people can be changed.
Gerrymandered with the state legislature, but they require winning in this November election first. This would be 1 additional seat in Wisconsin, 1 additional seat in Minnesota, 1 additional seat in Pennsylvania, and 1 additional seat in New Hampshire. This would bring the Democrats net with Republicans. And keep in mind, once these gerrymanders are put in place for Democrats, Republicans would need to win a trifecta in all of these states. in order to undo this anytime in the near future, which for pretty much every state that we have talked about so far is extremely unlikely. And this still isn't all the upside for Democrats that there is out there. I didn't even mention Nevada, which has a very contentious governor's race going on in the state. If the Democrats do well there and win the governorship, you can add another seat there for the Democrats if they gerrymander that state. And I've been somewhat conservative with the upside of the gerrymandering attempts in the states we've covered so far. There is more upside for Democrats here. The Republicans are somewhat at a ceiling. So at the end of the day, we could come to a total stalemate in this redistricting war, even though it looks really bad for Democrats right now. Now, at the end of the day, this is not great for democracy.
I mean, yeah,
so
democracy with air quotes.
I've said this in the past, and I continue to maintain that there needs to be extreme internal pressure within the Democratic Party if they win power with a trifecta at the federal level in 2028 to change Senate rules to get rid of the filibuster, to pass reforms at the federal level to prevent this in the future. Basically ban partisan gerrymandering. This is something well within the powers of Congress. But if there really is upside for Democrats in this race, it might be convenient for them to forget about this once they take power. So don't let them do this if this matters to you. Yeah, man, state of things are a little grim when we look at the maps here, but at least the future of this seems somewhat evenly grim for both sides.
Let me get one more video in here. Actually, we are at, what, 2 hours? Let's get this video in, and then I will end the stream.
Another day, another streamer being sued. Who could have seen this coming? It has honestly gotten to the point where I don't think I could hear anything negative about pretty much like any streamer, at least like any mainstream streamer, and be surprised about it, which is really a daunting thought, considering that these guys are influencing the youth in a massive way. What's even worse is that I think I would be genuinely shocked if I ever heard a single positive thing about any of the like top 100 streamers on the planet right now. That's probably not going to have any like lasting effects, right? Imagine being the ripe old age of 32 and being arrested and then sued for over $1 million because you wanted to play a game of hide and seek. Now, if I'm
already down.
Being honest, I would really hope that the vast majority of you would have quite the difficult time imagining such a thing. Just doesn't really seem to be something that most people would be able to picture themselves doing, you would think. But for some out there, hopefully just a handful, there's no imagination required because it is just their reality. Recently, the streamer Duke Dennis and a few other people have found themselves in the middle of a lawsuit that's seeking over $1 million in compensation because of a game of hide and seek that went sideways. It's a wacky world we're living in, guys. So yeah, basically, if you haven't heard, back in August of 2025, Duke Dennis and some other AMP members, which if you don't know what AMP is, basically it's like a streaming collective that Duke Dennis is also a member of, were live streaming a game of hide and seek at the shops at River Center, which is a shopping mall in San Antonio. And from what I can tell, it's a little vague based off what I've read, but it does seem like they had permission to film this at this shopping center, but it looks like during them filming, they went outside the boundaries of what was agreed on, and they started filming in areas they weren't supposed to be, and also they stayed on the property past closing time. Now, that's not really what the lawsuit's about. Duke Dennis did end up getting arrested for that partially, but we'll talk about that more later. What the lawsuit is actually about is a security guard named Don White approached the streamers to tell them, hey, you can't be doing what you're doing, and because of this, a member of the AMP security team, a guy named Levon Clark, punched the mall security guard in the face. Why so many of these streamers
what?
Hire these dudes who think that they can just punch anybody who says anything that the streamer doesn't like in the face? I don't really understand. Well, I guess I do. Most modern streamers do seem like the type of people who would like to punch a person in the face if they say something that they don't like, but are too scared to do so. So, I guess that makes perfect sense, actually. But the small security guard was punched in the face for, doing his job, and he's the one who's filing this lawsuit. Like I mentioned earlier, the lawsuit is seeking over $1 million from AMP Entertainment. And while I can't find any like hard specific details about this, it seems like Duke Dennis is who the guy is trying to get the most money from, which I guess would make sense since it seems like it kind of stemmed from an interaction between him and Duke. But multiple people and entities are named as defendants in the lawsuit, including AMP Entertainment, Duke Dennis, Kai Cenat, a producer named Henry Wolf, a content manager named Joshua Pujols, and the private security guard Levon Clark. The lawsuit says that Don White suffered injuries that required emergency room treatment, and that he's seeking these damages for medical expenses, pain and suffering, and lost earning capacity. And honestly, I hope he wins every single fucking dollar of it.
Like, what? It's crazy to me that not even for the Duke Dennis situation, that some streamers just go out there, antagonize people, and then have their bodyguards, like the bitch they are, help them. Like when they're about to get confrontated about it. That
You
or
guys
you have
know
like
that I'm not
Chud the Builder, who just carries around a gun and threatens people.
the biggest fan of like the modern day streaming world, and unfortunately it seems to be full of shit like this all the time. Dudes who have either never had a real job other than streaming, or dudes who have just been streaming for so damn long that they get so out of touch and entitled, and they think they can do shit like this with absolutely no repercussions. And honestly, it's just annoying as fuck. People should not be getting assaulted for doing their job because grown ass men, dudes in their 30s, want to live stream a game of fucking hide and seek. It looks like so far nobody like representing AMP or nobody that's a part of AMP has commented on any of this. They're probably being told not to. The only person who seemed to respond to anything was the attorney that's representing the security guard for AMP, and he said that Mr. Clark has and continues to maintain his innocence pertaining to these claims of wrongdoing. While only a limited amount of evidence is currently available to the public, we believe the totality of evidence will demonstrate the allegations lack merits. Which is interesting because on top of the, security guard on security guard violence, authorities are also alleging that Clark interfered with the arrest and injured an officer during the confrontation. So, I mean, it doesn't look great for the guy, I feel. Right now, he's facing multiple felony charges, including 2 counts of assault on a peace officer and 1 count of assault on a security officer. Like I mentioned earlier, Duke Dennis was also arrested when all this went down, and he was charged with criminal trespassing and evading arrest, but I think eventually those charges were dismissed. He did have to spend some time in jail though, and when he got out and returned to streaming, he had this to say about this whole incident.
I know, y'all want to hear about like the whole jail, but to be honest, I can't even talk about it. Like, what I can say is like the whole thing was just a big misunderstanding, miscommunication mostly.
Damn, he's trying his best. Like, hard as shit.
The thing about us, bro, the thing about me, bro, I'm not the type of content creator. That's going like risk my freedom for the content. Content ain't that deep for me. Like, it's not that deep to me. It never will be. Like I said, this shit was a big ass misunderstanding, big ass miscommunication.
And really, that's all he has to say about it. He does repeat himself a few more times during this like comeback stream, but he just keeps referring to it as a miscommunication, a misunderstanding, and like, maybe there was a miscommunication between like the mall security and AMP's team, but I feel like if we're being honest with ourselves here, if the whole like you'd never risk your freedom for content thing is true, and it really was just a misunderstanding, the second the cops showed up, you would have been like, oh shit, this isn't worth it. Let me not evade arrest. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It just seems a little contradictory to me to say something like this when a security guard for the mall walked up to you and said, hey, you can't be here. You had your security punch him in the face, and then you run from the cops when they show up. Like, just based off how contradictory that is, it makes me not really trust what he has to say on this incident. Anyways, I mean, I'm curious to see what comes of this. I feel like this guy has a pretty strong leg to stand on, because this news article says that the security guard, the one that was assaulted, his employment status could not immediately be determined, but state records indicate that he is no longer licensed as a security officer in Texas. So, I mean, it does seem like he lost his job, maybe lost some certification based off this incident, which, surprise, surprise, definitely helps a lawsuit where you're seeking lost earning capacity. Like I said earlier, though, I really do hope that this guy wins every single dollar that he's seeking. I really feel like it is time to do away with this content.
Well, I'm gonna say this: keep on the upside of life, and I hope you guys do well. I ain't got much more to say. Give me a second, and I thank you.